Melissa, whenever you're ready. Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Committee of the Whole work session today, Tuesday, November 21st of 2023. We're starting a few minutes late because the meeting in this room prior to ours ran a little bit over, but we welcome all of you. As we begin today, we have a number of items on our agenda. The first are our minutes from our October meeting. And then we have some information for us on the CIP Bonding Proposal. And so we will turn it over to Brady and James at this point.
Brady, you want to go or shall I?
I thought you were preparing.
Okay.
All right.
That's perfect. So, yeah, we are working with Ellers. Bruce Kimmel has had a couple of conversations with us recently to talk about a bonding strategy for getting the first 2 years of project in CIP implemented. And what we have this morning is a proposal for how to make that happen. There are different kinds of bonding authorities that we can tap into to get the funding that we need to do the first couple of years of projects. And that's basically the topic of discussion this morning. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Bruce.
Great. Thanks, James, and thank you, Commissioners. Excuse me. So, as you may recall from previous bond issues, every bond issue that a county or a city or a school district or other public entity might issue needs to have one or more statutory authorities for that specific issuance. And so you have, in general, an ability to sell general obligation bonds for various types of projects under part of the statutes called Chapter 475. But then there are specific types of general obligation bonds that are authorized by different parts of the state statutes. And the options available to counties are different from those available to cities and school districts and other public entities. And so we really need to look very carefully at, what are the specific sub-authorizations, if you will, that we're going to utilize to fulfill your needs and objectives. So these various subchapters, if you will, or sub-authorities apply to jails and law enforcement centers. They apply to county courthouses and other administrative type buildings. There are authorities that pertain to libraries and solid waste facilities and roads and bridges. And there's some overlap as well. So there's some authorities that or certain projects that you could use one authority or another. And then there's other types of projects where you really only have one option under state law. And so that makes it very easy. In addition, I don't know exactly how the legislature in their vast wisdom came up with these limits, but there are also statutory tests on a number of these sub-authorities. They're often tied to the county's net tax capacity, and in some cases, taxable market value. So in addition to looking at your projects and looking at which authorities are going to match up with the projects, we also need to look at your relevant formulas and make sure that we're not overutilizing the capacity as laid out in state statutes. So what we've done, James, Brady, and I, over the course of the last several weeks, is look at the projects on your list for 23-24, or probably mostly 2024. But you're well aware of those projects. They range from improvements at the airport to improvements at your community center. You've got courthouse and law enforcement center improvements, improvements to the community center again, I mentioned that. And then the YMCA building and a variety of others as well. And some of these are quite large, others are quite small, but you've really got a pretty long list of improvements across
county assets and priorities. There's some of these projects, a small handful, that it makes sense to use cash to fund because they are relatively small, and just going through the statutory requirements for a very small project, for instance, may not make a whole lot of sense. An example of that are the improvements that are desired at the airport. We probably could use a statutory authority called tax abatement for the airport projects, but James and Brady, both indicated that the county, of course, does have some cash available for capital improvements as well. And so there are a small handful of projects that right off the bat we are removing from the bonding list, if you will, and putting on the cash funded list. And of course, as we go forward, the county board can also, opine on this and either decide you want to cash fund more projects or fewer, and we could always, put certain ones back onto the bonding list if that was the desire of the board. So these are our recommendations, our preliminary recommendations on how to finance the county CIP, but they're not cast in stone, and we'll have more chance to unpack those and make sure that the game plan makes sense to all of you on the county board. So with that, let me just stop there really quick and ask if you have any immediate questions about that preamble, if you will, and if not, I can go into some of the details.
Any questions by board members? I just want to thank you, Bruce, for talking a little bit about the statutory limits and the relationship to some tax capacity and taxable market value. I think that helps our public to really understand what we're dealing with here. So thank you for that background.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, well, please interrupt me. I can't see you via my cell phone, but please do let me know if I say something or if you want to elaborate on anything as we go. But so as we look at these, as this set of projects, in total, as you're aware, there's about $4.3 million of costs that James and Brady have identified. This includes roughly $1.3 million for design, planning and design costs towards Cook County Judicial Center project, as well as about $2.9 million of costs actual physical improvements to a wide variety of county assets, as you're well aware. As we looked at that list, it really made sense to us at Ellers to look at placing the bondable costs, or the costs that we want to bond, into one of three buckets. And so those buckets are GO-CIP bonds, or capital improvement plan bonds, GO tax abatement bonds, and then GO law enforcement center bonds. And I mentioned each of those separately as a type of bond, but please know that we can actually, even though they are sort of three separate purposes, in three separate statutory sub-authorities, we can issue all of this as one bond. So we'll put each of these projects that we're bonding for in one of these three buckets, but the buckets can all be merged together essentially into one bond issue, which is a lot more efficient for the county than selling three separate bonds. And so we definitely want to do that for efficiency, and it also attracts more interest in the market than having three small bond issues. So that's our tentative game plan, is to use those three mechanisms and to have those as three parts of a single bond issue. Let me start with GO-CIP bonds. One thing that is really important to note right off the bat is that you have your county CIP, your real CIP, your budget CIP, whatever you want to call it. And then there's a CIP that relates to this bonding authority under state law, and that's what I'll refer to as the bond CIP. The bond CIP is really a document that we only create for purposes of meeting those statutory requirements. There's a list of questions that need to be answered within that document, the bond CIP, and they're kind of some of them are quite irrelevant, actually, but they're part of state statute, and so we need to answer those. But I want to make clear that, you know, what we do to meet the statutory requirements of GO-CIP bonds is one thing, and the projects that we include in that bucket are one thing, but they're not the same as your overall county CIP, the one that you've been working on, not only for 23-24, but for future years as well. So it's sometimes a little confusing because we're talking about two different kinds of CIPs, but I'll do my best to make sure that we differentiate between the two. And so you'll hear me talking about the county CIP versus the bond CIP. Hopefully that makes sense. So with the bond CIP, again, this is a specific statutory authority for counties, and state statute lists certain types of projects that can be financed and project costs that can be financed using GO-CIP bonds. And what we're looking at using that authority for right off the bat here in 2024 would be for the near-term county courthouse improvements. You may recall that there's about $1.4 million of improvements that have been identified as necessary no matter what happens in terms of a Justice Center project. We're also looking at funding a variety of improvements to your highway facility. That is also a sort of a core function of CIP bonds. So the cold storage line item, as well as the main, I'm guessing that's main building improvements, that would also fall into the CIP bucket. And then finally, the planning and design costs relating to the courthouse portion of a future Justice Center, Judicial Center project would also be funded with that CIP portion. So we don't have a lot of purposes there. We're sort of cherry picking the ones that it really makes sense to use CIP bonding for, and saying, yep, that's what we're going to include in our bond CIP document, and the projects that will be included in that column or purpose, if you will, in the bond issue. And we can, certainly at a future meeting, show you in greater detail, again, that cost breakout. We just wanted to sort of give you a high-level overview of that here at today's meeting and make sure that the overall approach makes sense and that you don't have any fundamental concerns or questions about the approach that we're suggesting. Any questions about the bond CIP document or that GO-CIP bond authority and what we would be using that for here in this initial bond issue?
Commissioner Hawkins.
Yes, thanks, Bruce. This is Commissioner Hawkins. I just want to clarify something. So when we did, I believe it was a GO-CIP bond years ago with a long list of projects that we were going to do, and I'm trying to remember, it was like a boiler system or a heating thing, or I don't remember. Something that was on that list that didn't happen. Do we still get to use the money that we say, and I'm specifically thinking planning and design for this building. If we do not do that, do we get to use that money for other maintenance at the courthouse or the highway department? Or is it specifically, can only be spent for design?
No, what we would want to do is to draft the document in a way that allows some flexibility. So that's a great question. So your team has ideas of what it's going to cost to make those physical improvements, as well as the portion of those planning and design costs that would be attributable to the courthouse portion of a judicial center. But yes, we can craft those categories within the bond CIP to be broad enough to give you some latitude in using those proceeds from that portion of the bond issue.
All right, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I should also note that if there are ever any surplus bond proceeds, those can always go towards debt service as well, and thereby reduce the debt levy that you would have for that portion of the bond issue. Obviously, it's ideal if you can use those for project costs, but it's not like you run out of options or somehow get in trouble if you just end up not having any other authorized project costs. But we'll make sure to do our best to avoid that scenario.
Thank you.
Great. Sure. So then moving on to Law Enforcement Center, that one's pretty self-explanatory. This is a GEO authority that relates both to jails, county jails, and law enforcement centers. And so you can really do anything that's relating to law enforcement there, not so much courts. And so, we do need to be careful in as we go forward with the judicial center in just making sure that we're reasonably allocating costs between what I'm calling the courthouse portion of the project and the law enforcement portion of the project. But some of that is more arts and science as well, and we would rely on your design team to really guide us in that regard. But there is a very broad authority to bond for jail and law enforcement center costs. And so we are looking at using that authority for both the physical improvements to the law enforcement center that are required here in the next year or two, as well as, again, some of that design and planning cost for the judicial center. Your team had indicated that roughly 70% of the square footage of the facility would be relating to courthouse functions, and about 30% would be relating to law enforcement center functions. And that doesn't have to be, again, super precise, but we're using that 70-30 split to allocate the planning and design costs between, again, the GEO CIP bond purpose and the GEO law enforcement center purpose. So that is what you would see in terms of that planning and design cost, as well as the specific physical improvements that will be made with this bond issue. Any questions about the law enforcement center portion?
Commissioners, any questions? There are none, Bruce. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So then last but not least is the tax abatement portion, and I saved the one that is maybe the most of a misnomer or prone to confusion for last. Tax abatement is often used as a tool for economic development purposes. It's sometimes referred to as tax increment financing light because it works a little bit like TIF, or can work like TIF, for purposes of providing an incentive for a new development or a new business. But it also can be used by public entities to fund public infrastructure and improvements, and it is used quite often for that purpose. And it's used to fund projects that don't really fit very well into other statutory authority buckets. So you've got a number of projects like that on your short-term CIP. Some of them are, for instance, Colville Town Hall, the community center improvements. You have some pretty major improvements at the main building. We've put that into the tax abatement column. We've got, just scrolling down here, the recycling center, since that is levy supported. That would most likely make sense as a tax abatement project, and then the YMCA improvements as well. And so we've got about $900,000 of project costs here in the short-term CIP that don't fit into another authority, but that we can absolutely use tax abatement for. So what I want to say about tax abatement, and we can go over this numerous times in the future, including at an eventual tax abatement hearing, is that what all that tax abatement really is in this context is we would figure out how much the debt service would be on this tax abatement portion of the bonds. And then we would say, okay, we are using, in theory, we are using the taxes from an identified set of parcels in the county to pay that portion of the debt service on the bonds. It doesn't change at all the taxes that those parcels pay. They pay taxes just like any other parcel would in Cook County, no more or no less, based on their parcel type and parcel value. But it's basically saying we at Cook County are going to direct this amount of taxes from these parcels to paying the debt service on the abatement portion of the bonds. And I know it sounds kind of like some rigmarole, and it is to some extent, but please also know that it's not like you even need to segregate this or allocate it specifically in your levy and budget process. Brady and I have talked about this. It's really a process you need to go through up front in order to have the authority to do the abatement, but you don't actually have to track those specific taxes from those specific parcels in any special way. And in that way, it's actually a little bit different from the abatement process that you've used for Superior National, as well as for the Lutz and Housing. Those are both tax abatement financings as well. So you've done this in a different way a couple of times, but those were more focused on the improvements at the golf course, of course, and then the housing that was built several years back. And so I just wanted to note that it's the same mechanism, but we would be using it to fund public infrastructure and really just identifying those parcels to sort of jump through that statutorily required hoop. But for all intents and purposes, it's not going to be any different than any other type of levied debt service. So I know that was a really long run-on sentence. I hope I didn't lose you, but I wanted to go into a little bit of depth because it's a tool, again, that gets used very often, and it works very well for some of these recreation type improvements in particular. But it's a little bit different from how the county has used tax abatement in the past. Are there any questions about that?
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Hawkins?
So is there interest differences between the three different types of bonding?
No, that's a great question. And that's part of the reason why we can put these all together, because they are all ultimately paid with property taxes and also backed with the full faith and credit of the county and your very strong credit rating. And so the bond buyers really don't even care at all about the statutory authorities. We're really the only ones that need to make sure that the process is met and that that these are bona fide, legally authorized debt issuances. And of course, bond counsel, your lawyers would also need to sign off on this. But in terms of the bond market, they just want to know, oh great, Cook County has a $4 million bond issue coming up, and you're rated such and such, and the structure looks like this, and here we go, we're excited to bid on it. That's more their mentality.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I suppose it's there, in some extremely rare event. I don't know if has anybody you aware of ever used the tax abatement the way it's set up, Bruce? Are you aware of any?
You mean the way we're talking about it here?
Well, like with the golf course and with the housing project, if the other sources of funding didn't appear, like we had lodging tax for the golf course, and we had rental payments from housing, And I suppose even in that case, if those revenues hadn't materialized the way they were expected, we'd probably just use a GO rather than use the abatement on specific parcels. We would just generally tax it under a GO authority. But has anybody ever used abatement that you're aware of on the specific parcels?
Oh, yeah. There have been a few instances, and that really is more, or more than a few instances. That is really more in situations of economic development where you're making improvements specific to a type of a business or a set of businesses, or the houses along a road, for instance, and you are using their new value, and typically it's the incremental new value that you're capturing and using as the tax abatement to pay the debt service. So there are cases that are really project specific where they capture, again, typically new taxes to do that. But I would say, Brady, though, you're right. The vast majority are broader and more just an upfront step you need to take, and then it gets levied just like anything else. And I should note that we did check, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, left them at the office. I'm working from home this morning. But I did check and looked at the debt service on your Superior National bonds, on the Lutsen housing bonds, and on the estimated abatement portion of this bond issue. Again, everything being subject to change with this bond issue. And we're still only using a fraction of your statutory authority for abatement, which is just helpful to know in case you do have more economic development purposes or affordable housing purposes or anything else in which you would want to use abatement. You still have, well, I think more than half, at least more than half of your statutory authority for tax abatement. I should also note one last thing. We might want to use tax abatement for some future projects as well that might not fit into the statutory authorities, other statutory authorities, other projects on your list in future years. But assuming you do go forward with a judicial center project, really the only tools that we would use for that would be CIP bonds and law enforcement center bonds. We wouldn't have to use any of the tax abatement authority for that future judicial center project.
Thank you, that's helpful. Commissioner Hawkins,
Yeah.
You had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. You kind of answered part of it, but I'm wondering about why we wouldn't just put things like the recycling center and YMCA into our CIP bond instead of tax abatement. You're telling me now that we still have room because I know there's HRA needs, so I don't want to use it all up. Great
question. You're spot on. So there is a pretty long list of types of projects that can be funded, both initial construction as well as improvements that can be funded with CIP bonding authority, but it does not include recycling centers or recreational type facilities. And so that's where we need to use tax abatement or cash for certain types of projects that don't fit within the types of eligible projects that are spelled out in the CIP legislation.
And then I'm wondering about the identification of the parcels that are going to be set as tax abated for the payment. How do you determine which parcels?
That's my question as well.
Yeah, so awesome question. I meant to mention that. You can do it any number of ways. first and foremost, we'd have to make sure that we didn't use any of the parcels that are already part of the abatement for Superior National or for the one roof housing. And that will be very easy to avoid, but it would work with Brady and his team to just make sure that we're not inadvertently choosing those parcels. I would honestly recommend finding a way of capturing the smallest possible number of parcels that add up to the debt service on that tax abatement portion. So just to give you an idea, and this number is probably a little overstated because I think we agreed to take out a little bit of the abatement portion and use cash, but we're currently looking on a 15-year, assumed 15-year bond issue for the abatement portion. We're looking at, we've estimated debt service at about $90,000 per year. So what we'd be looking to do is identify a set of parcels that generate roughly $90,000 in county taxes per year. And so, I haven't done any research on this and haven't asked Brady and his team to do any research on this as well. But, it might make sense to do an abatement of a certain number of parcels in downtown Grand Marais. Again, this would just be, quote, the county taxes being captured through the abatement. And again, it's really just an accounting exercise, not like you'd be doing anything different with those. But we don't have to. We could also choose other parcels, other properties in the county. The big thing to note is that there doesn't need to be a nexus or direct connection between the parcels that are, quote, being abated and the improvements that are being made. So we don't need to have any kind of specific connection between those private parcels and the community center, for instance, or the YMCA. They really can be any parcels anywhere in the county, and that is perfectly fine.
They don't have to be, they don't have to be contiguous or anything?
Nope, they don't need to be contiguous. It's really, and that's why, I'm thinking that choosing a handful somewhere, that are contiguous might be just simpler to explain, but that's not a requirement.
There's an area called the Gold Coast in Cook County. So
well, funny that you say that, Commissioner. I do have a client on Lake Minnetonka that decided to bury electric lines. It's a stretch of road that is right on the lake, and the city wanted, both for storm protection purposes as well as aesthetic purposes, to bury the Excel electric line. And because, I won't bore you with all the details, but because of that project and because it wasn't actually city-owned property, but Excel said, yeah, if you want to do it, you pay for it and we'll do it. Long story short, we had to use abatement bonds for that, and it didn't take very many of the houses on that street to pay for the abatement debt service. So that project sprung into mind when you said Gold Coast, because you were on track with that.
I imagine all our commissioners have some parcels in mind. Thank you, Bruce. Other questions? Administrator Yorkie, is there something you'd like to add to our capital improvement bonding discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I would add is to reemphasize something that Bruce said earlier, that as we're talking about abatement bonds, we're not talking about abating individual tax payments. This has no bearing on what any county taxpayer would actually pay to the county. It's really just a way for us to designate some portion of tax payments to service the debt on these bonds.
And I think even if you did abate, it wouldn't change their taxes
Correct. That's absolutely right. Abatement is the number one misnomer in state statutes as far as I'm concerned, because in every other state that I work in that has abatement, you're actually reducing taxes, and that's not at all the case here. So I'm glad that James and Brady brought that up. So, commissioners, I guess the last thing I'd add, and I appreciate your patience with me droning on about this. I could talk your ear off about, all the different quirks of county financing, but what we'll be doing is working with James and Brady then to, prepare that bond CIP document, to prepare some documentation relating to tax abatement as well. Fortunately, not much is required for the law enforcement center portion of the financing. And then looking at dates for a public hearing for both the proposed abatement as well as the proposed bond CIP document. You've done that before with both abatement and CIP. No reason why we can't have that those hearings on the same board meeting date, excuse me. And then we would look to have the bond issue then at some point after that public hearing, and probably on the same date as the public hearing, we might also have a pre-sale discussion with you outlining some of the other bond details. But it's a pretty straightforward process, just a few of those hoops to jump through. And we would make sure we got you all that information well in advance. And, that discussion at both the public hearing and the pre-sale would be to just make sure all of your questions are answered, make any last-minute adjustments that you care to make. And then we would look to have the bond issuance roughly a month after that.
All right.
Any questions about timing?
Commissioner Mills.
Approximately when is that?
James and Brady, I forgive me, I've been running around like the proverbial headless chicken lately. I don't remember if we set a date or if we were looking at dates in December and January for that public hearing.
So I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brady.
I just made a note. We talked about January 9th or 23rd for public hearing.
Right.
I think we decided on the 23rd.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think we wanted to avoid doing anything during the holidays because we only have a few business meetings left before the end of the year, and we've got the final budget and levy to approve, and just we're concerned that it would be that those agendas would be too full. So,
Thank you.
Yep. So just one last thing on that. So if we did proceed with January 23rd, then we could have the bond sale as soon as February 27th, because we do have a 30-day waiting period in terms of the bond CIP portion of the bonds. There isn't a waiting period that's required for, excuse me, either tax abatement or the LEC. But we could then have the sale in late February, and then you could have proceeds by the middle of March.
Great, thank you very much. It's nice to have that date on our radar. Commissioner Hawkins.
I'm just going to ask it. I'm pretty sure you're going to put this all in writing for us previous to January 23rd, so we can understand. I mean, I'm taking notes here, but I would prefer this coming from the administration and Bruce himself. This is the amount that we're thinking about this bond. This is the time frame. This is what our debt payment would be, and I'm asking for detail prior to, as soon as possible, really. So we have time to process this and think about how this really is, we're going to approach this going forward.
Commissioner, I think that's a really reasonable expectation, and we can certainly work to make sure that the board has that information well in advance of January 23rd.
That's pretty much a standard process with Ellers.
Great.
I figured that, but I just want to make sure it's
Yeah.
on the record that.
Absolutely. Other questions that commissioners may have? It looks like there are no further questions, but I just want to thank you on behalf of the board and the community for giving a really thorough explanation of what it's going to take to put together the abatement.
Okay, well, thank you very much and appreciate the opportunity. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Bruce.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye. James, are you still there?
I'm still here.
All right, that's great. Just checking. We heard that little noise. We wanted to check. So we'll move
And kudos for your handling of the technology, by the way.
on. You'll have to thank Commissioner Mills and Melissa and Diana. We've had a team effort on this.
I may have pulled a finger though, pushing those buttons, so expect a workman's comp claim.
Get to the paperwork, so.
All right, we're going to move on with item C, which is our update, and we appreciate that Brian Silence is here with us this morning. Thank you, Brian.
Yes.
Welcome.
Good morning.
And Madam Chair, if I could just give a brief introduction. This is on the agenda today because we've gotten a request from Commissioner White to have some background on what the maintenance department does. I think you all have sort of a general idea, but there's a lot that they do that's kind of under the radar. And so I wanted to give Brian a chance today to talk about the full breadth of the work that the maintenance department does. The other thing that I think most folks are aware of, but I'll say it again because it bears repeating, and that is that, over time the scope of work in the maintenance department has grown, and we haven't necessarily applied new resources to handle that increased scope of work. And so the way things have been for the department over many years, since long before I got here, is they're frequently working in a very reactive mode, scrambling to try to keep up with maintenance needs. And we haven't really put them in a position to be able to kind of get ahead and keep ahead of the work and be proactive in responding to, the need to replace equipment, for example. And that was one of the key points of doing a capital improvement plan, was to get up to speed on all the things that have been deferred over the years, and to give Brian and his team a better opportunity to stay ahead of things and to replace things before they break down completely. And so we can talk about that a little bit more after Brian goes through his part of the presentation, but I just kind of wanted to set the stage for that. So Brian, do you want to jump in?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
It's sometimes difficult for us in the maintenance department just to say that, because we're short-staffed and there are so many buildings and so many places that we have to go. The first page here, of course, is our mission statement, that we want to make sure that the buildings are in good shape and safe for people to come and be here and use the buildings. We also take care of the fleet, which is time-consuming and costly, of course. The second page here shows a list of our 22 buildings and the other 9 areas that we take care of. I'm not going to read through all of them. We all know that we have a lot of buildings and there are a lot of things that need to be done at the buildings. I will say the YMCA is the biggest consumer of our resources and our time. We have some big projects going over there. We have an issue right now with the pool boiler that when the YMCA was built, I asked him not to piggyback off of the school's utilities and things because you're looking for issues. Well, we're having those issues now. The propane system wasn't it's designed big enough to work for everything, but if something fails in that system, usually the first thing that goes is equipment at the YMCA, because they're last in line and they get the last amount of propane, so then it doesn't work efficiently. And the boiler has burned out 2 times now since we've been open in 9 years. We're in our 9th year now. So, and that's expensive. I have a quote here for 15,000 something just for the boiler, which, like I said, we replaced it 3 years ago. The system failed last year, and now we're having issues with it. We're limping along right now until I can figure out what we're gonna do to put in a new propane system for the YMCA, their own standalone system. You wouldn't think it would be terribly expensive, but I got quotes from $250,000 to $500,000. The propane tank would have to sit, it has to be 50 feet from anywhere over there. Well, the tennis courts are there, the parking lot's there, the school is there, the baseball fields and everything are there. So the only real place that it could go would be over by the community center. And then that's a lot of probably blasting and whatever to get the propane lines over. So, expensive.
Is there an alternative to heat the pool, and maybe not the building, but the pool itself? Is there another alternative we could move to for that?
This would be just for the pool boilers because,
okay.
because,
That's what you're talking
because the
about. Okay, I thought it
school
was the whole-
boilers provide the heat for the YMCA.
Okay.
So their system would continue to use their boilers, but to get a tank big enough to do the pool boilers, you're looking at over 3 million BTU, or, yeah, 3 million BTUs for those boilers. So, it's a big system, and it has to be pressurized and everything. And these are just preliminary figures, because I've just been working on that real recently here. Right now I'm in, and part of the reason is that Loch Navar will not warranty the boilers. They're not warranting them now, but they said if we sell you one, you're not gonna have a warranty with it. So,
Is that on our CIP plan from CRPPS, that those boilers need to be replaced every 4 years?
no, they should last longer than that. The spa,
expectation, but-
the spa boiler has lasted 9 years and continues to burn clean and efficiently, but it doesn't take as much propane as a pool boiler. So when it drops in pressure, then it affects a pool boiler.
And why will they not warranty?
Because they say it's a flaw in the system and not a flaw in their machine.
So
Their
the
machine
delivery
works-
system? So they're talking about the delivery system?
The delivery system, yes.
So if that were to be upgraded, I mean, is it internally, inside that building?
It's a tough
Commissioner,
question
if I-
because if you put in your own standalone system and a part fails in our system, they won't warranty the boiler either.
Okay.
So, but it looks better if you have your system and then they can say, okay, well, this part failed, you know, we can't say it was your system failure, but we will warranty it. But
It's
What
about
I'm
the
looking-
proximity of the existing fuel tank to the pool boiler and the fact that it's also serving the heating boilers for the school, correct, Brian?
the existing one does, yes. So,
And so basically, the pool boiler is like at the end of the line,
correct.
yeah.
So, and I'm looking at a different company, it's called Pentair. Maybe they would have a different type of pool boiler, and maybe they wouldn't have an issue with the delivery system. I don't see why the delivery system is a problem, but I do know that when the system goes down, it does affect that boiler. So it doesn't matter if we have our own system, if we're on another system. So, but the big
Brian,
issue
what about
is,
the idea, is there such a thing as like electric heating systems for pools?
yes, I looked into that too, but then we would have to change all of, or a lot of the power delivery system also to the YMCA, which would be very expensive. I haven't got a quote on that yet, but I did look at electric boilers. But there again, you have to upgrade transformers and delivery system there also.
It might not be $500,000 though.
Correct.
Maybe it will be, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it would be that much, but like I said, I've just started the
Yeah.
last few days looking into
Jeez
this,
Louise,
so.
oh my God.
So those are some of the things we deal with, you know, and there's always damage at the YMCA. Somebody broke a sink and a toilet in the last couple of weeks, so it's just a big consumer of time and money.
From day one, pretty much. Right?
From day one, it's been a headache. That's why the school and other people backed out of it right away and said, here, you take it on, and so now we're looking at painting the weight room and changing the flooring in the weight room. There's another, you know, $20-some thousand to do that. It's expensive. And the pool equipment and all of the chemicals and the delivery systems, they're expensive too. So, and they're getting older. And chlorine corrodes everything, so we're dealing with some of those issues right now. You try to stay on top of it as best you can, but yeah, as you can see inside, if you go inside, you see the rust starting on the ceiling and stuff like that. Well, that's going to be an issue in a few years. It'll have to be taken care of. So.
And is that in our CIP plan? I mean, I've looked at it, but specifically, do you think the CIP plan as presented to us commissioners covers replacing the roof at the right time frame?
Yes, I think it has been.
Good.
It's been
That's
all
what I
talked
think.
about. A couple of times we've had them in and looked at all of that, and all of these systems and all of our buildings have been gone through, and there's a replacement plan for everything out there.
Good.
And I'll add, if I could, so when CRBPS first did these building visits, they went through each building with Brian. And so he was providing, real-time feedback as they were going through and looking at all the systems, and they asked questions about it. And then after that part of the work, when they had a list of recommendations that they were going to include in the CIP, there was another round where they talked to Brian to say, does this all make sense? And they really went through it like building by building. And so there was a two-stage process to identify projects and to make sure that they made sense. And in a number of cases, Brian had information that caused them to modify what was put into the plan. So it's not like the consultant just went off on its own and came up with this plan. There was a lot of vetting with Brian to make sure that the items that are included in the plan are realistic and needed.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for that, because that is so important for us that don't know, that we know you agree with what's in this plan, especially when we're going to bond for the first few years of repairs and maintenance, that yes, you think that whatever list we're working on is right. Priorities are made the right way, so I
Right.
appreciate your input.
Yeah, and we try to look ahead of time to see where we are, but like I said, when I started here, we had 1.3 million in the building fund, and now we have like 65,000. So it's all gone to different things, and some of it's been used for studies and, things like that. So with $65,000, where do you start, The town halls, they need roofs, they need soffits, they need paint, things like that. Well, we don't have the money for that. So then they're like unhappy with us because we need to finish this, and take care of our buildings. The Hoveland Town Hall was supposed to be $65,000 into that to get it up to speed and everything. at 100-some thousand, I told them, stop, you have to stop. We don't have the money to keep doing this. So this year we had to put in a new electrical system. There's still walls that need to be painted out there. Some of the pavilion needs to be stained and painted. There's just not money for everything. You know, you have one boiler breakdown, which we did at the jail last year. The one burnt out. We knew it was getting close. It burnt out. So there's 20-some thousand. It's like we're always reacting to what's going on. So it's a struggle sometimes.
Well, and that's what's really nice about moving forward, having a plan in place, looking at things strategically, so we get on top of the needs that we have and are prepared for them.
Right. So, and if we go on, what I have here just talks about what we do, the number of vehicles we have. We have 17 vehicles, which they're going all the time, so it's just it's a thing for David to gas them up and clean them and to get them in for repairs, and they're all getting older too. So there's going to be some of those that need to be replaced.
Brian, with vehicles, what is kind of the typical schedule, or is there a mileage point you need on a vehicle, or is it when they start to present lots of problems that we replace them? What do we use?
Well, vehicles last over 100,000 miles, so when we get up over 100,000 miles, then we start paying more attention to what's going on with them. You know, the recycle truck has been giving us quite a bit of issues. I thought we were going to be okay with that for a few more years, and hopefully we will be, but that's got 170-some thousand miles on it, and now we're starting to look at it's maybe time to replace it. But most of them are 100,000. Some of the newer ones are like 60, 70,000. We got years left on them. But the ones that are around 130, 140,000, then we start looking at replacing them. We've looked at enterprise. I'm not sure if that's the way to go. We've kind of gone away from looking at that for the time being. And then moving forward with CIP, all of that, it's changed how we've been looking at what we're going to do and when we're going to do it until we come up with a good plan. And yet to have a good plan, you want to do everything right as you go along, or you run into issues like we have at the YMCA. If you cut corners, then your ceiling falls in, or the roof isn't insulated properly, and just different things. So
The boiler goes bad prematurely.
that's it.
Right.
So I have a list of some of the bigger projects that we did last year, or this year. We moved just about everybody in public health. We've put in all new furniture. As you well know, a lot of changes happened up there. We painted most every office up there. I didn't make a copy of that, but I could. But so that's time consuming to take the furniture out and scrub the carpets and paint the walls and then put everything back in, or wait until the company comes and adds the new furniture, and then you do that, and then some of it worked and some of it didn't, so we had to change some stuff. So it's a lot of work for our guys, This year we drained and cleaned the pool. Jimmy had a broken ankle, so it was just pretty much me. And Troy was there somewhat, but he's a part-time guy, so he's not always there. So we had stairs to fix over there. We painted in the pool. We repainted the hot tub and patched some of the stuff there. We tear the boilers completely down and the pump systems and clean everything. That's a big job every 2 years. We changed the offices at the community center. Sarah went into the back room. We remodeled that and repainted it, put new furniture there, stripped the whole outer area where Leanne was and patched and painted, and even the ceilings and everything in there.
And Brian, it's worth mentioning that I don't think that had ever been redone since the building was built in '92, right?
That is correct. And there were some wiring issues, there was some illegal wiring that had been added on in there somewhere along the way, so we had to straighten that out. We put in new lighting. We put in new lighting out in the arena to go to LED lighting, which is way cheaper and easier to maintain. We put new desk in the MIS area. We painted that. Furnaces, we have 52 furnaces to work on. We had a few breakdowns this year, which is typical with that many furnaces, so we got that taken care of. We put a new service panel at the Hoveland Town Hall. We staked and plotted 2 grave sites at the old Settlers Cemetery because people wanted to put headstones in, and then they want to put a urn in this next year. They were going to do it this fall, but then we staked it out, and then I think they're coming in the spring to do that. It's another thing people don't know that we do.
Yeah, I did.
So it's all surveyed, it's just a matter of finding the cornerstones and measuring and whatever. We did, and it's not like we do all of this, but some of this affects us, like the new water bottle filling station at the community center. Then we have to patch and paint and help the plumbers re-plumb things, you know. We're working on the mold issues here at the courthouse, which is turning into a bit more of a project than I thought it was going to. So, but we want to do it right, make sure things get taken care of. And that could get expensive for downstairs, the mold that's in those storage rooms down there that are all closed up. We may have to put in some kind of a ventilation system or whatever, humidifier or dehumidifier, you know. And then again, the painting and stuff at the weight room and adding new mirrors and new flooring, things like that. So those are 10 things that I just thought of this morning while I was sitting down there. Next year's projects, we got the CIP projects. We're still going to be ongoing with mold repair. It looks like we're going to have to change out the smaller boiler here at the courthouse, and one of the big boilers hasn't been used for years because it has a propane leak that many people haven't been able to figure out. So we're going to be looking at some new boilers here at the courthouse. The lights on the second floor upstairs, I'd like to get them fixed. Those big dome lights, there's like 150 some light bulbs in there. We need to get that fixed. And we got some outside repairs here at the courthouse, sidewalks, some stairs by planning and zoning there. They were built crooked and they hold water and they're very slippery in the wintertime. We have some brickwork out here to do. I'd like to work on the ramp a little bit and get rid of that. Would be nice, but at least, you know, that's a continuing thing, painting and scraping and resurfacing and trying to keep the water from running into the building down below. So that's kind of what I have.
Commissioner White. Couple of questions. When you talk about the lights, the dome lights, you mean you're going to change out the light bulbs, right? Not the fixtures?
No, we're going to go to LED lights of some sort. I had a quote of about $7,000 to do it, but then we got into the CIP thing and we thought we're just going to stop where we are and get that in the process here.
Okay.
But we're getting into the dark days of winter now, and it's kind of dark up there.
And the furniture, how much furniture do you still have stacked up in the basement to give away? This is a public service announcement for organizations out there that need file cabinets.
There's still some down there. I've gotten rid of some of them.
I did notice an empty space. There was
The
the floor.
The Hoveland Fire Hall came and took some,
Yep, yep.
and the clinic was looking at some.
So it's just for the listening public, if you need office furniture, there's some nice stuff down there.
Yes, and it's free. And it's gotta go.
So if I could add one thing, as we're moving forward on the implementation of the CIP, in order to make any of this work, a big piece of it is information management. And so as we were working to develop the CIP, we worked closely with the MIS department, that's our IT department, to talk about how we were going to manage all this information moving forward and how we were going to track progress toward implementing projects in the CIP. And what we came up with, and I may have mentioned this before, but Kyle Oberg, who's our Geographic Information System specialist, developed an app that our maintenance staff can use on a phone or a tablet. And basically, as they're doing work in our buildings, once they do, say they replace a light fixture or whatever the task is, there's a way to log it into the system. And the application that Kyle created then allows us to transfer that information over to the database that CRBPS manages for us. And that allows us to keep monitoring our progress and make sure that we're doing the things that the CIP indicates we need to be doing. And so information management is going to become increasingly important moving forward. The way that we have managed information both for buildings and for our fleet has been not very data-based. It's been, we keep records on paper. It's not a very conducive way of being able to access and update information. And that's something that as we move forward, not only do we need to be having conversations about how to make sure that the resources that we're giving maintenance are matched to their scope of work, which currently it is not, but also how are we staffing the maintenance department. And I would say we should stop calling it maintenance and start calling it facilities, because it's really a lot more than just maintenance. It's about managing our facilities in a way that is proactive and that involves planning rather than just reacting. And again, how we manage information is going to be a really important part of that. And so I just want to give the board a heads up that I expect to be coming forward with requests for additional resources to help us address that. There are two ways that you can address a mismatch of resources and scope of work. You can either reduce the scope of work, or you can add resources to enable you to fulfill the scope of work. And I don't have a clear answer at this point which of those we need to lean more heavily on. I think we're going to have to do a little bit of both. But we need to have both the resources, and we need to have folks working in those areas who have the skills to be able to manage information electronically, for example. And so as we move forward on the implementation of the CIP, we're going to have some discussions about those resources and how we make sure that we're positioned to actually do the work that needs to be done.
I think this has been a really valuable discussion and really helps us to get an idea of the scope of work that you and a very small crew are taking on for our county. Are there any other questions that commissioners have? Commissioner White.
About the mold that we've done inside this building. Do we not have anyone locally? James had stated that we're on hold with the renovating the in land services in the office and in doing the mold and fixing it, because we are waiting for air quality specialists to come and monitor the mold levels in those rooms. Don't we have anybody locally that does that at all?
No, and it's hard to find very many people in Duluth. I think there's only 3 companies in Duluth that do it. And one of them does it, and then they bid on the work and stuff. Seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest there, so I'm trying to get a hold of a separate company so that they will just come and test it and tell us what we can and can't do going forward. I haven't got any response from them. Rowan gave me a number of somebody he knew at that company, and I called that number, and that person hasn't called me back yet. So it's been about 3 or 4 weeks now of waiting for somebody to get back to me, and it's getting pretty frustrating. JJ is coming in to work on the sheetrock and to mitigate what's going on there this week or next week, I believe. Probably will be next week. But then we can't go forward until somebody comes and tests the air. So, a little frustrating there. But as we know, everybody seems to be really busy and short-handed in all the trades, so.
For the next 10 years.
So we try to do the best we can.
Absolutely.
And to bring somebody out of Minneapolis is, pretty expensive.
Commissioner Hawkins, you have your hand
Yeah, so, thank you, James. I had written down the information, how we are live with that program that Kyle did. It is up and running
We are,
today.
and
Good, okay.
it takes time to use it, and then I went out on leave, and now I'm back, and I've been working with Kyle a little bit, trying to get some more of the information put in there.
Because I think that's really important to keep on top of and make sure we don't get behind. So I'm glad to hear it is live and we are using it. And I'm wondering how, because we also have the, how do you get the terminology wrong, where the request of service through the,
Yes.
what do you call that, help me?
Help desk.
Help desk.
Help desk.
Yes. So how does that, are you happy with the way that's working in your department of other departments needing, I need new paint?
Yes,
How do you prioritize those requests?
that's a tough one.
I was afraid about that.
As time lets us do it, but the bigger things are safety and ergonomics. If it's a safety issue, then it's right at the top of the list. If it's ergonomics and it's somebody's physical needs, then it's at the top of the list. If it's something that they want, then it kind of drops down a little bit.
I just want to make sure in this process of, we might be changing our buildings. I'm sorry, staff, nobody gets paint today.
Right, right.
I'm just trying to make sure, asking you how you
Right.
would do that.
Yeah, and James
How you say no.
James and I talk with the department heads, and we make sure of how important of a need it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely triage process there because, some needs are urgent and others are less so, and so there's a constant conversation going on about what gets prioritized.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner White.
And then this tracking that Commissioner Hawkins said, that we have in place already, who besides you will become competent in entering and tracking this information? We're talking about redundancy. We need redundancy, more than one person that knows how something works.
Sure. Kyle is really good at it because he designed it and he helps me with it. But Jim and Troy are just now getting started with it. There's, taking pictures and
Sure.
looking at things as we go. And then so far I've been adding all of the information in. But, they'll have to get better at that. Jim is good at computer stuff, so.
They will with time. So,
Always a matter of training and practice.
It is, and it's
Being, for all of us, comfortable with new things that come our way all the time. Administrator Yorkie, anything you would like to add to the conversation at this point?
Hang on a second. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. The only thing I have to add is I just want to give a big thank you to Brian and his team for all the work that they do every day. They are not in an easy position. There's a lot to manage. There are always new problems to address. And, these folks, not only do they work hard during the week, but there are frequently instances where things break down over the weekend, where an alarm goes off, Brian's cell phone rings at 3 in the morning, and he's responding to that stuff, and his staff too. And that's the kind of thing that I think, a lot of us don't really see on a regular basis. We may not hear about it, but this job is not one that just ends at 5 o'clock on a Friday. It's continual. And so big thank you, Brian, to you and your team for all the great work that you do every day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We really appreciate you being here and putting together all this information. And thanks, Commissioner White, for bringing this up. I think it's really good for not all of us, but also our community. We'll put you on the schedule for next year.
Okay.
Yeah, and just your knowledge of all of our facilities and buildings and the needs paired with kind of that management system or the CIP evaluation, all that. I mean, without you, it would not nearly be what it is. And
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the solution. So thank you for going through it. I'm sure that wasn't easy either.
Commissioner White.
That's job security. Oh, no doubt. How much, when something, and we're kind of in a transition at this moment, but just historically, what is the, how much can you spend on repairs or upgrade of a project what's the dollar amount before you need additional authority to purchase something?
According to Brady, there is nothing, if it's an emergency or a safety issue, then we just go ahead and fix it and we spend the money. If it's a regular project that's gone more than what I thought, $5,000 is what I need to come to the commissioners for. It was set at 1,000 before, but
That's a capital. Now repairs, we're gonna exceed that often, but that's not a capital. Fix a furnace or something like that.
Right.
And he's got a budget for it. And if he's gonna go way over his budget, he may have to come and talk about that, if that's continuous, but, we've been fairly close over the years.
mhm.
That's good to know. All right, well, thank you so much, Brian. We appreciate your time this morning, and we appreciate all you and your crew do.
Thank you. Hope you guys have a nice Thanksgiving.
You too as well. Thank you so much. All right, well, we'll move on in our agenda to talk a little bit about Commissioner Committee assignments. And Melissa, are you able to pull up page 12 of the packet on the screen? It'll take me a minute, but probably. All right, I'm hoping so. That was kind of the intent, so that in addition to commissioners seeing this, that public would be able to see this as well. But it's page 12 of 50 in your packet.
It's not.
Give me a,
I've got the historical summary.
Is that in the back?
it's on the back side. Yes.
Historical summary.
Yeah. Historical summary of
Oh,
Commissioner
that.
Perdiz.
Yeah.
So as we look every year at all the committee assignments and what changes and what needs to be done differently, I want to thank first of all Commissioner Mills for reaching out to our auditor treasurer and having Nick put together some information for us on what's happened with costs for per diems over the last number of years. And so we have data from 2015 through this past year. And one of the things that really struck me is there are some obvious unusual things, like 2019, a commissioner got $700 for per diems for an entire year. I want to, as we look at this data, keep in mind that we've had some commissioners pass away, become ill and pass away, that have impacted this data. And we have also had Commissioner DeShaw move on as tribal chair, which impacted for a period of time this data. So we need to look at that, keeping those major things in mind. The year of 2018 was when the most money was spent, and during these years, by the way, per diems have not changed. They've been $100 for commissioners. What I want to point out to the public is that I think the process we're using to talk about our assignments annually and just not move them on automatically is reducing our overall costs. In 2018, we spent $52,350, and last year we spent $45,200. I look at us becoming kind of lean and mean, that we're using our resources really well and making good decisions about our committee assignments and meetings that we attend. So I just want to publicly thank the board and thank Dave for gathering information and giving us an opportunity to share this with the public so that they know that this is something we're constantly working on. I'm going to pass out to everyone here just a list of what was compiled last year together of our committee assignments, and to also let people know that I have visited with each commissioner about assignments to get us ready to actually have a formal discussion and a vote later on. It'll be in December and then also in January. It'll be at our organizational meeting when we actually vote on these items. Having been passed out to you is again the list from last year, and then also just a discussion tool. It says 2024, no decisions have been made, but something that we can go through. But together, I'd like to start out with a document from last year, which talks about the frequency of meetings, because in my discussion with various commissioners, there were some things that had changed, all right? And so the first page is Commissioner White's District 1. And one of the things that we talk about is our committee assignments related to AMC. And Commissioner White, I sent you an email a couple of days ago about the tribal forum. That's something that typically has been attached to District 1. And kind of, have you had an opportunity to visit with Sheriff DeShaw?
I did. I talked to him about that when I was up the other week. And then I asked him, I sent an email to him and I have not heard back from him. I do know that he's going to Washington DC, but I don't know when. But anyway, as to who last year I was signed up to go and it was canceled because of the snowstorm.
Right.
And then they never rescheduled again.
Right.
And Commissioner DeShaw thought that it would be very beneficial for that group if they would go to also having a Zoom option, because there's so many more people that would benefit from hearing this. So I've not heard, he knows, we had a discussion, he knows that I will not be going, but he did not say, put forward any suggestions as to who. He's not offended, I explained to him, and so, but he thinks it would, he'll be there this year.
Okay, well that
He'll
is
be
good.
there.
Then
So-
he will cover that, and so we don't need to allocate unless he comes back and does recommend you that we have another.
Right, and I will reach out again today to him to see, this was last week when he emailed me, and I've not heard, so.
Okay, all right, well, great. Is there anything on this list in terms of frequency of meetings that has changed?
Are we going through all districts right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the one I saw in District 3 was the Y Advisory Council, and that is now, I think, and Commissioner Hawkins, correct me if you think differently, but I think we're on a fairly regular schedule now for that. And so that's on, what is it, the third Monday of the month? Yeah,
Okay.
so that's different, but I can't imagine there's been much else since we've talked.
Right.
That's changed.
Commissioner Storley, anything for you that's changed at all? And I'll say one thing in my
Oh,
district.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There is another one. The library board is not on the fourth Monday. We now are on the third Thursday? Let me look here,
All right.
because that's tomorrow, or this Thursday, right? And that's also Thanksgiving, so.
I imagine they will be moving that meeting.
But that's the regular. 1, 2, 3, that is the fourth Thursday. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep,
Fourth Thursday. Okay.
fourth Thursday.
All right, we will get that taken care of. And in my district, I noticed that the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway, I shouldn't say I noticed, but at their meeting last Friday, they were talking about changing the date of the meeting because they would always like Robbie Hass from the Highway Department to be there and for me to be there. And so they were going to, potentially change the date of that meeting. But that's one of the few that kind of attaches geographically to my district, so I don't think that will impact anyone else. In our review of all the positions with individual commissioners, one of the things we also noted is that there are some errors on the county website. And if you recall, the county website was put together last January, and there was a period of 2 months where we didn't have an administrative assistant. And so I noticed there are some updates to the county website that have not been done. So we will make sure as we move forward and we finalize our assignments for 2024 that we are also making sure that the county website is accurate, so that if individuals are trying to contact us about a particular assignment, they can do so.
And that would be my phone number. I do not have a landline anymore. So
Okay.
it's the 663-7092 is no longer existing.
All right, we will make sure to get that information to Jana when she returns and get that. Any other items that commissioners, based on our discussion, would like to bring up or talk about? I know we can't vote on anything today. We've just collected a lot of information. Continue to update and share with you prior to our organizational meeting in January, but I just want to make sure if there are any last adjustments or suggestions that we talk about them today when we're all together.
Well, I don't know about the other commissioners, but I have noted this is probably the most unusual year in that if I'm on a committee, it then goes down to another subcommittee and I'm adding more meetings to my original. Is anybody experiencing
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
This is the most I've ever experienced.
yeah, yeah.
I'll say, like, as an example, so I do all the lake associations, and there are many of those, but what a per diem is paid for would be something larger that it would impact all the lake associations, such as invasive species, that aquatic invasive species. So, that's a discussion point that, maybe we can talk about today. Are there things that we should be deleting or things that we should be adding that are on people's lists?
When I go to the Caribou Lake Association, I do that as a public service. I don't
Right.
consider that.
And that's what I feel is, in terms of my lake associations as well. Commissioner White, you have a number of them.
Well, actually, I've not contacted me.
Okay.
They don't have any up at McFarland. We don't have any lake association kind of.
As your district grows, they will come. But I feel comfortable leaving it that way and maybe having aquatic and invasive species, the invasive species team, and then maybe Cook County Coalition of Lakes as the ones that would be per diems, but not individual lake associations.
One other one that I'm not confident on is the Northwoods Food Project. There's been, the scheduling has been changing. What the latest one was, is that the latest one? The one I see right now is the second Tuesday of the month. But there's going to be strategic planning happening, and that group is reforming or changing, so we'll see what kind of schedule is put there. So.
And as schedules change, I would encourage commissioners at our, regular county board meetings to bring these issues up when we have commissioner concerns at the end of our meetings, because we need to make adjustments during the year, and our bylaws do allow for that. Our county attorney, Molly Pippin, is looking at updating our current commissioner handbook, helping to clarify things, but it clearly states in there that if there are conflicts with dates of meetings, any issues can be brought forward to the county board at a meeting, and so that is the appropriate place to do it. But I think giving ourselves more flexibility, as some of these meeting dates just changes, is really important to do.
Mm-hmm. We already talked about this, so maybe this is just old sheet, but the pandemic economy is no longer relevant.
Yep.
Yeah. The only other thing I would bring up around this discussion is just talking with Brady and learning some of the history with how things were done and how I think it's a better system now, but it also gave me pause for thought. But and again, please correct me if I'm mistaken here, Brady, but back in the day, commissioners would go to their meetings and then they would come to the board meeting and say, I went to these meetings, please approve them. And almost as an after the fact thing. And I was like, huh. And it sounded like that made for sometimes difficult conversations, because it was often there was an expectation from the commissioner that attended the meeting, like, well, this is valid work. And then other times, and at the same time, other commissioners would say, well, I don't think so.
And that's where I
And
think
so this
looking at our
system-
commissioner handbook and operating under those conditions has made a positive difference for us, and constantly reevaluating the work that we do. Again, we're saving taxpayer dollars compared to 2018. We've dropped about $5,000 because we are reflective in our work, and we're trying to make good use of our time. And I would just hope that we would continue to do that. Brady?
Oh, I'm just gonna say, yeah, there's actually a statute and it does leave a lot of it up to the commissioners as to a joint decision as to what you're gonna compensate. It does have to be public work, et
Right.
cetera, but it's really your decision as to what level of work and what types of things that you wish to compensate. So
Does
that
everybody
leaves
feel
it.
comfortable, or if you don't feel comfortable with what's in the commissioner handbook and our discussions, let Attorney Hicken know. We want to make sure that we're operating in a very open and transparent fashion, that's what's guiding our work. And Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, so thinking about that and understanding per diems, and on this chart, we have a list of this is the commissioner responsible, this is the alternate. Now, I show up at some of my alternate meetings so that I make sure I'm up to date,
Right.
and I can, if I need to step in, I know what's going on. But I'm assuming only one person gets the per diem for that.
According to our commissioner handbook, you can attend 2 meetings annually as an alternate and get paid for them.
See, I don't have my commissioner hand, I turned it in.
It's
I don't have it, and I'm like,
It's
oh.
also electronic, I will send that to you.
Okay, well, it doesn't, but, yeah, I just want to make sure that that was my impression, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with that, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, as an
All right.
alternate.
Absolutely.
And then there were some, and maybe we didn't now, but there was, some have 2 commissioners, right?
Yeah, right, like extension, we both have to be there, so
Right.
we both get paid for that one.
Why is that?
It's law.
It's statutory, it always has been.
Just curious.
It's one of those very old state laws that probably should be updated. But it'll never happen.
Not in our lifetime.
No.
Anything else as you're looking at these?
Thanks for doing that.
Absolutely.
When was the last time the law library?
We just met a month ago.
Why did I not know that?
I gave a report.
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah, you did, you did.
Yeah, Molly
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
the other attorney, they call it. It had been a while since we had met, maybe a year and a half or so ago, and we don't need to meet that often
Yeah.
until things come up.
And do people actually make use of those?
Oh, yeah, it's up on the second floor.
Yes, I know where
Yeah,
it is. So
yeah.
I was just wondering if people
Sure.
make use of the resources.
And we've updated some of the books, so we're up to date on some of the law requirements, and they use the computer, and, yeah.
That brings up, though, a really good point. As commissioners, if we would talk to the individuals sending out the invitations and make sure our alternates always get an invitation. So as Commissioner Hawkins mentioned, you have a chance to review materials, stay up to date, so if you have to step in, you're not stepping in cold. You need to be informed. And so if we could each do that at our meetings at the beginning of the year, that would be really helpful.
Funny you should say that, I disagree.
Okay.
I am easily overwhelmed with alternate emails. And having, I mean, it's basically, if you're gonna be going through, you're basically the commissioner. Like, if you're going through all of that to stay up to date, that is an assignment still. So if I need to be an alternate for somebody, I need the past meetings minutes, and then usually our roles are a lot more broad, right? It's usually about what is the broader county doing, broader community. It's not usually a decision. I guess on some of the regional boards, there are those too.
Yeah, sometimes
But-
we vote.
Yeah, but, yeah, there are, I do vote on some too. But what I'm saying is I prefer not to get emails as an alternate because, it's.
You can hit delete.
Oh,
I prefer to get it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would,
but if you're saying ask people to send emails and I'm saying I don't want that, then I think it might be more appropriate for us to just do that on our.
and is everybody getting
Do it on our own.
plenty
Yes.
of advance notice if they need to be an alternate at something?
If you can.
If you can. Obviously, sometimes things come up the night before or whatever, and it's hard, but just so we're all communicating. Great.
Well, and there's even sometimes conflicts with alternates.
Yeah,
So it's.
absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's right. So the Jamada,
Yeah,
you know, none of us can attend it, so.
Right.
You know,
What's the?
I don't ask anybody to cover.
because we're all here.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all, very good discussion, and we'll continue to get things cleaned up and send information out to people so that we are well prepared for our January decision and vote on these. All right, at this point, we're going to move on to talk a little bit about commissioner compensation. Ties in a little bit with what we have up on the screen. But there's some other aspects to it as well. And Commissioner Mills, I know this has been something that's been important to you, and you brought up the last couple of years. Thank you for doing that.
Yep.
One of the discussions has been, what about COLA for commissioners? And what are people's kind of thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, that hasn't been the focal point of my inquiries, but since you're asking about that, I think that it's important for commissioner salaries, just like any other salary, to keep up with the with inflation. So I recognize in some years, such as 2020, in fact, there was great concern about what was going to be happening and how things would all pan out, and so it's best to be as conservative as we can. But in just as normal procedure, I think it makes a whole lot of sense to keep up with inflation. Otherwise, you're just digging a hole.
And that's what happened.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's, yes.
Clearly.
And, I mean, so that's that. But the focus of my inquiry has been, what should we be getting paid? What has been the cost of health insurance increases? How does that affect the ratio? And just how does the job and the pay mesh or not mesh? And And so what I had done was put together a spreadsheet last year. I have not updated it. I certainly can do that. Just about all of the counties in the state, and then the comparables that we had used, and even if you just go with the average, taking out the comparables for our comp study, we're still below what I think what a leadership position would get paid. I talked to numerous, I have yet to talk to somebody who thinks our pay is too high. And I have talked to many people who will not run because they can't afford it. It's just not, it's financially foolish. And it's not about the finances. This job is about service, but you also have to be able to make ends meet. And you also want to entice and recruit candidates to do this important work, because ultimately it's all coming from our pockets. And so if you've got people that have maybe a shorter term focus, that can lead into some more painful longer term pocket draining. So I think it's pretty important that we think of this strategically and for the sustainability of our community. I don't think we had a whole lot of conversation just about the thoughts on that spreadsheet, but we did make steps, and I appreciate that. I think that's a prudent way to go about it, not just tearing the Band-Aid off, but to make those incremental steps. And so I'm hoping that we'll do that again, but we just haven't had a whole lot of room for discussion. So.
Commissioner White.
Have term limits ever been discussed?
I don't know. Has that been an issue?
I don't know.
Oh. I don't think it's been an issue. Cook County has quite the turnover. Other counties have commissioners who've been, well, Lake County, as a matter of fact, I think a 30-year commissioner or something like that, and other ones, they get awards at AMC for 26 years and all this kind of stuff. It was kind of unfathomable to me, but so I don't know that that's an issue. I'd like to know your angle on that, though.
Well, I was just wondering if there was a value in not having the same, I mean, every year you learn more, so you're more valuable to do things, but is there a point where maybe it's time to open up the position for somebody else? I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I know, not every public board has term limits or anything. Don't they have term limits like at the community center board? You can only sit on there so much.
Yes. But I don't think as public, I would guess that would be a state statute. I don't know
That's what
that
I'm looking
we
at
can,
right now.
but
So
I have personal experience with this. So
please share.
I go back and forth, term limits or not. I believe we should have new blood on the board to give new perspective. My dad ran for 20 years. He was a county commissioner for 20 years. He didn't run in his 21st year because his daughter said, "Dad, you're too old. It's time to get new blood in here and I won't vote for you." So.
Wow.
See, I've been telling people my opinion for their entire life, but that's where I think the term limits come in. The voters get to decide, we need new blood, we need fresh ideas. But you know what? Those 20 years of experience are very valuable.
Yeah.
Talking about some of the committees I serve on with those commissioners that have been there for 20, 30 years, I love it. I love talking to them after a meeting and say, give me the background on this. What happened? How come this is this way? Very valuable. So we need both on a board, I think.
Yeah.
It's
I think
very
you're right.
important.
Yeah, both are valid. If term limits was more of an, if we were running into this issue, I would be much more curious, but as it is,
It was
It's
just a
not really-
curiosity question. that's
Sure,
all. It
yeah.
was just-
We have it every 2 years.
touche.
Every 2 years.
There's a vote.
Yep, right.
Yeah. That's a good,
Any history you would like to lend to this conversation, Brady?
No, I mean, you really haven't had that problem. I think, I haven't seen anybody stay 20 years. It was a kind of an end of an era, I think, for real long-term commissioners. So, not an issue.
Commissioner Hawkins?
So we have to vote on our salary before January,
Yeah.
correct? Do you have a date that's coming before us, is it? On our agenda?
The next meeting.
The very next meeting.
Yeah.
December
I'm sorry.
12th. It could be the next one.
That's correct, the 12th.
Yeah, so what are people's thoughts about increases?
What are you looking at?
Well, last
Which
year,
percentage?
last year we did
yeah.
3,600 increase, and I think my opinion from the salary survey from AMC was that we're about 12 grand under, and that was last year, and so this was kind of breaking it up into smaller portions, and I think that's wise.
Are you proposing another 3,600?
Well, that's what I would hope for at least. But I haven't calculated I haven't applied any cost of living things to this or found out the rest of the counties, not that that's a factor, it's just perspective, where they went with that year and then just the health insurance costs.
Right.
Every year we don't do something, we're going behind.
Yeah.
Every year we do something, we're working at it, right? And I just don't know where that balance is and what the end goal is, right? Like, and we don't need to determine now. We don't have to
Yeah.
determine this year, next year, anything. It's just, all we have to determine is next year. So,
It's about progress and working towards something, and I frankly like the idea of having a COLA and then the small steps to $3,600 as a way to, over time, get to where, we feel we should be. That's my opinion. Commissioner Hahn?
I'm just looking for some clarification because I did not go back and check my notes from last time around.
yeah.
But I was under the impression we set a percentage, a COLA percentage when we were talking about that 3,600 and we rounded it to that 3,600. It was more, that's how we came up with that. Because I remember discussing that I support the COLA, whatever the other elected officials in our organization get for COLA, I support us getting the same. And I'm kind of remembering it was just about 3,600 is what it worked out to be. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well-
And I'm curious what the COLA is for 2024 for elected officials and what that number would look like if we got the same COLA.
So for
So
perspective,
Commissioner,
oh, sorry, James, I just did a little math thing here and I'm gonna cut you off. My memory was that, I don't remember how we got to 3,000.
You have to look it up.
I think it was just breaking down that 12 grand, and the 12 grand is just out of memory here, so. but,
Okay.
That's in my notes.
Okay. Good memory. But last year's COLA was 3%,
It was
right?
3%.
Or was it 3.5? Regardless, if our salary had been 24,000 last year, a 3% increase would be 24,700. So I don't know if that 3,000 was based off a COLA or just trying to fragment that bigger. The reason it's 3,600 instead of 3,000 is because, man, it'd be so nice if it was 300 a month just rounded.
That's the
that,
way-
that was
that was
my,
the
yeah,
discussion.
yeah,
Okay.
That's, but sorry, James.
oh, I was just going to add, I mean, negotiated COLA for 23 was 3.5%, and the same for next year, so 3.5.
Is it then 3 on the, okay.
It was
Thank you.
3% in 22,
Okay.
and then 3.5 each in 23 and 24.
Thank you, okay.
And my records show that you gave yourselves 3% for 22 and 3,600 for 23.
Okay.
That's how we did
There we
it.
go.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, so my suggestion would be just as a base, COLA, right? We gotta keep up with inflation. And then, I think this is what you were saying, is in order to achieve that higher value, which is not determined necessarily at this point, we're picking away at it and doing the 36 on top of coal.
Correct. That's my understanding.
I'm gonna ask for the budget numbers. Hands up.
Yeah.
Hands up, Brady.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's gonna be $18,000 for the 3,600 times 5 there. One other thing I wanted to note, and this kind of ties back to our other conversation with the per diems, was that we are not required to claim per diems. This is something that we're authorized to claim, but we're not required to. And so I think it's pretty interesting to see that 700, you know, in a whole year. I think different commissioners are in different situations. Some have to claim it like I do. Others may not have to. I'm guessing like in 2019. And so we as commissioners do have flexibility in not, if we don't need it, we don't need to claim it, sort of thing. I just want to point that out because there can be pushback about what we do spend, right? And why aren't we tightening our own belts? And that is, if a commissioner feels like that is something they need to do, they can do that. It's just that I want us to have an accurate picture of what the cost of being a commissioner is, so that people going into the position know that, and so that the public at large can see it in a transparent fashion. When we get these big discrepancies, it really kind of throws my understanding of what's going on. It's hard to glean information when we have wild discrepancies like that. The low from 2016 is 6,700 versus 2019 is 700. Like that's, and I guess in the overall budget it's not that big, but it's just, you know, significant.
And just for both the public and for commissioners, on page 7 and 8 of our handbook, it says Cook County administers county board compensation in accordance with Minnesota statute 375.055. County board members receive as compensation for services an annual salary as set by a resolution of the county board, and it must be established prior to the end of the preceding year. It is effective January 1st of the new year. The resolution shall contain a statement of the new salary and must be published in the official county newspaper. Prior to the effective date of the new salary, each county board member shall have the option to accept or reject any salary increase in writing in a form prescribed by the county board.
Thank you. So there's that option too?
So there's that option as well.
And Brady can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's this variation. We've had commissioners who maybe campaigned on that issue and didn't sign that piece of paper.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. And that's dangerous, in my opinion. But just for, who can afford to represent our community, and we want good representation.
Good representation and.
Not saying that we don't have that, just.
Good. I'm really glad you're not pointing fingers
No,
over here.
no.
Commissioners that reflect the community, who lives here. And my dream would be that, I'm really appreciative that Commissioner Mills is on our board. I would really love to see more younger people with families and people who are working in the community have an opportunity to be a commissioner.
That'd be cool. I just want to see, like, well, I want us to have ranked choice voting, to have 5 candidates in every election. I think we need more choices.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm frustrated with, is people can't afford to do it, and that really limits our choices, so.
And the demographics of Cook County,
Yeah.
we're raging.
True, very true, yeah. So representation on that, yep, yep, yep.
And part of this county is the diverse communities, geographic locations are different types of mindsets.
Culture, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a really good discussion and a needed one before our December 12th meeting, so.
I do have one thing.
Oh, yes.
When you talk about these distances that are traveled to get to a meeting in Grand Rapids or wherever, you get $100 for the meeting and you spend 10 hours on the road and 4 hours at a meeting, so that's 100 divided by 14. They might feed you. It's not much.
No.
I mean, there's not much, and so I just think that should be thought about. But then, in this age of Zoom, I don't know, I mean, it's.
There are certainly some groups that take the opportunity to utilize Zoom, others because of statutory reasons
Yeah.
don't allow Zoom.
Right,
And so it's kind of a mix, given all the different
Right.
committees and assignments that we have. But I'm like you, I keep advocating when I go to meetings that could be by Zoom. If I have the option, I always attend by Zoom. And if I don't, and I think it's appropriate, I'll bring it up and just keep bringing it up.
And some counties have a in-county per diem
Mhm.
and an out-of-county per
Oh.
diem. So there's another option,
Mhm.
because,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be in Kuchiching tomorrow, but guess what? I
Right.
have 2 other meetings here. That's
Right.
not gonna work to drive that far.
Can your alternate attend?
No.
No, but I can go by Zoom, because I
Oh.
emailed saying, hey, this
Post
is
it.
not gonna work.
Great.
And it turns out, of all of us, I think I got a message this morning, out of the 5 of us, 4 of them are gonna be there by Zoom.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah,
I'm like,
it's
so-
everyone's preference, I mean, for distance wise,
Well,
right?
it saves
Nobody
so
can-
much mileage and time.
Mhm.
And, yeah.
Well, I think that's a really important thing to
well, that
discuss
should be
too.
considered, because if there's no if you don't have the Zoom option, you don't have that option, then that time,
Well, it's something at AMC we need to constantly be bringing up. I mean, that is one of our vehicles where we can bring that up. But and
Oh, the Zoom,
changes
I
at the
see.
legislature do happen. So,
Well, I mean, what it made me think of, absolutely, we need to advocate for that, but what you were suggesting is having a different rate for out of county, because that would help. I mean, even if it was, and I got shocked looks when I suggested this before, but just even if it was $200 for a per diem, and you're driving,
You're
what,
spending
14
14
hours,
hours.
right, and it's still like, but it's better than 100, so, I think that's a good idea too, or just increasing per diems in general. I don't know the last time they were increased. I know our per diems, we looked at this, are a little higher than average, but that's another way to factor in compensation. And like I was saying, you don't have to do it in writing. You can just not take the per diem if you don't need it. So,
and it's 1 per diem per day.
correct.
And then when I have 4 Zoom meetings in one day,
Yeah.
that's happened a couple of times.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Pick and choose.
Yes.
Well, and then you only get, right, it's your whole day or half the day, yeah.
Well, it's just that should be, I'm not complaining about that, I'm just explaining that. So you are doing 3 meetings, you're just doing 3 meetings.
I want to keep promoting Zoom for our board meetings. None of us have ever been sick or in the
Mhm.
hospital or whatever, or recuperating, but we can't join on Zoom.
Right.
For medical, I thought you could.
You can 3 times annually, according to state statute, and that's what we're governed by. So,
And can you vote then?
Just those
If you're
3,
Zooming?
just those
if
3.
you have a medical approval. Correct.
Doctor's signature.
Kind of like
Oh.
school, when you have to bring the note.
Yeah.
So the board did have 2 rates for a few years.
Oh,
And what I recall is then there were the people that had 4 in-county meetings, getting and somebody
Mhm.
going to Duluth and getting, the higher per diem. And so then there was kind of a hybrid, and then it got too complicated.
Yeah.
I can see that.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it evolved.
Thank you for that history lesson.
I mean, all that being said, your time is still, oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You spent just as much time in county as,
Yeah,
and still, okay.
And you didn't
yeah.
get any more for it.
I think it's twice.
Or more so, yeah, yeah.
That's true.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So it gets complicated.
Yeah.
it does.
But you don't have to drive.
But you
Bonus.
can go on
Yeah,
while you
yeah,
drive if you
yeah.
have Bluetooth, I
Yeah,
don't know.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Anything else regarding commissioner compensation? Appreciate all the discussion and thoughts on this. And we know we have other meetings coming up today,
Fast.
soon. So with that, we have minutes of our standing committees that are attached to our agenda. And with that, we shall adjourn. Have a great Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you, everybody too.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James.
You too.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Matt?